Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. How many of us find joy in our work or in our lives or our relationships? Well, my guest today has, and she reaps more joy out of life every day by helping people and organizations discover, actively live, and operationalize their purpose to unleash success, fulfillment, and of course, joy. She's a best-selling author, public speaker, co-founder of 3 award-winning PR and marketing agencies, PR Week Hall of Famer. I personally love that one. The founder and chief joy officer, great title, of Joyful Planet. Let's get right into it with the amazing Patrice Tanaka. Patrice, welcome to the show.
Wow, I love that. Amazing. Thank you.
Well, I couldn't find the right word because there is no real word to describe in one word who Patrice Tanaka is. I mean, the intro itself gives some of it away that you've done so much and, you are considerably accomplished in the field of public relations and in communications and marketing, but also in this business or this mission that you've set up in Joyful Planet and bringing joy to people or helping people to find their joy, but it's not just to make people happy. It's actually to help people and companies succeed and operationalize their purpose. And that is fascinating to me and my listeners.
It's fascinating to me. That's why I do this work.
Well, I just wanted to get started with just like we met on LinkedIn a while back. I remember we had it set up for like a 15 or 30 minute just get to know you conversation. We were on the phone, we were on the Zoom for about 2 hours. And it was one of those things. We were introduced, I think, by Ken Jacobs.
Yes.
Who is just delightful. And we just hit it off. There was so much there, and I wanted to continue that conversation about purpose and about finding your why and finding your purpose and getting to joy. And it just made perfect sense for you to come on the show and let's talk about it a little bit more. But first, why don't you, I want to leave it up to you, Patrice. Why don't you tell us a little about how you got here and a little background for the listeners who don't know Patrice Tanaka or Joyful Planet.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan. Well, I was born and raised in Hawaii, but I live in New York City now because it was a childhood dream of mine to actually live in the Big Apple. And so, here I am, and I have been living here since my early 20s. I've actually lived here in New York longer than I've lived in Hawaii, but I go back and forth. So, I'm a happy camper.
Yeah.
But when I first came to New York, it was all about, my career in public relations. And I worked at a small 4-person PR agency that was run by a female entrepreneur. Brilliant, but kind of a difficult person to work for. But because we were so different, she liked to just sell, and I like to service clients. We actually got along well. So I helped her to actually build her business to a point 7 years later that we were an attractive acquisition by Chiat Day, the advertising agency. So we were acquired by Chiat Day. My boss left about a year into the acquisition. And it's pretty typical for entrepreneurs, right? And I'm running this subsidiary operation of Chiat Day. And our biggest client comes to me one day and says, "We love you guys, but my senior management thinks there's going to be a recession. So they've asked us to cut expenses across the board. So unfortunately, we're going to have to terminate our relationship with your agency." And it's like, oh my God.
I hate when that happens.
I know, because I had 3 people working full time on that account. And I knew if I told my boss at Chiat Day we were losing our biggest client, he would make me terminate those 3 people immediately. So I didn't tell him because I had a 90-day termination clause in my contract with the client. And I figured I could come up with a solution to avoid having to terminate 3 dear colleagues. But at the end of the day, the only solution I could come up with was, oh my God, I think I'm going to have to spin off our subsidiary, set it up as an independent PR agency where I was the CEO and I could elect not to fire those 3 colleagues.
So all of this just to stop yourself from letting people go?
Yeah, because I am the person who will, build the biggest mulberry bush to dance around if that is the only solution to solving my problem. So I
Nice.
only led the management buyback because it was the only way I could think of to avoid having to terminate those three colleagues. So
Mhm.
12 colleagues followed me in this management buyback. We spun off, set up PT and Company as an
Mhm.
independent PR agency that was wholly owned by the 13 of us involved in the buyback. What we didn't know at the time was that this was July 1990, which
Mhm.
was, we later learned, the official start of the recession of 1991.
Oh,
So
right.
within 6 months, we lost half our billings, right?
Ah,
And you know what? If you lose half your billings as an agency, you have to cut staff costs accordingly, right?
yep.
But we were an all employee owned agency, and I couldn't do that, and if I did that, it would only be a matter of weeks and months before everybody else left and we'd have to close up shop. So I figured the best way out of this predicament is that we all take a pay cut equaling a 50% reduction in salary
Oh.
costs. And we just focus on rebuilding the lost business because eventually the economy would rally and
Mhm.
we would be okay as long as we didn't give in to our fears and give up. So that's what we did between January 1991 and December 91. We focused so hard on rebuilding the lost business that we actually grew 100%. And we were
Oh,
right back up at the same billings level we were 18 months earlier when we first, did the
yeah.
buyback. So we could breathe a little easier. But as you know, we still had a big problem in that we were a no name startup agency in a city, New York City, where there are thousands of established PR agencies, and
Mhm.
in a country where there are tens of thousands
Yeah.
of established PR agencies. So I thought that we had to figure out a way to distinguish our brand from every other agency brand. And since we had no money, the only thing I could think of was let's just articulate, our point of difference. Let's communicate who we are, what
Mhm.
matters most, and how we serve the community at large. Now, today, that would be called a business purpose.
Right.
And the way we articulated this business purpose in 1991, 92 was PT and Company is committed to creating great work, a great workplace, and great communities that work. And that business purpose focused and drove us to do exactly that. And within 8 years, we were recognized as the number one most creative PR agency in the country and the number two best place to work among all PR agencies in the country. And at the time, I didn't really think about that, oh, we were, helped by this business purpose. I wasn't really thinking about that. I was just thinking about, thank God, we're making a go of this startup PR agency.
Yeah. And you were way ahead of your time, obviously, with business purpose. But clearly, if you had a business purpose that said that you wanted it was a what great workplace and great communities that work, right?
Right.
Then your teammates, your partners, everybody also had to have that same like commitment to that purpose in order for it to work and to
Right.
their own purposes had to be served through that. So you have to sort of create this magical synergy almost.
Yeah. And if you think about it, the three things I chose were the three things I know that all of my colleagues, agreed with, right?
Right.
We were all committed to creating great work because that's the only reason that clients come to you and stay with you, right? You don't
Mhm.
you don't get together to create uh mezzo work, right?
Right.
Or
Yeah.
somewhat good work, right? It's got to be great work. So there was no disagreement about that. And then create a great workplace. Well, everybody wants to work in a great workplace, right? So
Mhm.
no disagreement there. The disagreement and discomfort for my partners was the whole thing about great communities that work. And by that, I meant healthy, sustainable communities within and beyond our workplace. And some of my colleagues thought, ugh, why can't we just say great work and great workplace and just leave it at that. Well,
Hmm.
everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of people would be comfortable. A lot of agencies would be comfortable claiming that ground. But the thing that would distinguish us was the third piece, creating great communities at work, because no one was willing to put a stake in the ground there. Because if you make a claim like that, then you actually have to walk the talk. Otherwise, you look ridiculous, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how'd you deliver on that third piece?
Well, that's the piece that really helped to define who PT and Company was.
Hmm.
Because if you have a purpose that says, great work, great workplace, great communities that work, then you actually have to decline certain types of business.
Hmm.
And so we turned down 4 tobacco manufacturers as
Uh-huh.
clients. I mean, big names, right? But how could you represent any without not living up to your own stated
Hmm.
purpose? The other thing is that if you say that you're committed to creating a great workplace, then you cannot continue to work for a toxic client. And twice we had to resign our biggest client
Hmm.
because of that. Because, in a PR agency, you can't just reassign the account to another team because the client is still toxic, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we had to resign client because of that. Another time we had to resign a client because they took this anti-gay position, which we really begged them to reconsider, but their hands
Hmm.
were tied. And so once we helped them through the crisis that they created for themselves, then we realized we couldn't continue working for them and support, and defend an indefensible position, right?
Yeah.
So we had to resign that account too. And again, at the time, it was one of our biggest clients. So every time we actually walked the talk, it really impressed upon our employees that we really mean what we say, and they could go out proudly to talk about the agency. And when we met with prospective clients, we talked about some of those ways that we actually, you know, lived up to our own stated business purpose. So
Yeah.
all of that really was what helped us to, achieve the recognition that we did 8 years after co-founding the agency.
It's amazing because I've been in an agency before and I've worked with agencies for years. And nowadays, of course, the agencies state their purpose and by and large, they're sticking to their guns. They're walking the walk on this, right? They know that if they get caught out, especially in an age of social media and so on,
Right, right,
you make a stand, you make a commitment, you got to stick to it, or else
right.
you're going to be called out and you're being in serious trouble. But even before that was de rigueur. I suppose you were doing that, and I can't imagine that there were that many firms in the '90s and certainly even in the early 2000s yet who were or that were really focused on purpose as much. So it must have really helped you to not only keep the clients you have, but attract great employees who also they must have felt ahead of their time in this respect.
Yeah, and in fact, we got a lot of attention because, again, to operationalize that purpose, we had to do a lot of things, to make sure we were creating that great workplace. So
Mhm.
our workplace was actually designed to accommodate and welcome the whole person into the workplace. So in the middle of our office was a living room with comfortable sofas. We had an open office, so we had smaller, what we called bubbles, so people could have private meetings and
Mhm.
call their doctors if they needed to. We had an eat-in kitchen and lunchroom, and we even had a meditation room, probably the first
Mhm.
meditation room in the PR industry,
Yeah.
because, and it wasn't saying that you had to meditate, but here is a sacred space that if you wanted to pray or take a nap or meditate, it was there to honor the needs of you to be able to do that within the workplace. So we did things like that gave teeth to the
Yeah.
commitment we had to create a great workplace.
And
And
everyone since then is just a copycat. Oh,
well, actually, I was at a dinner once many years ago with Richard Edelman, and he said, "You started this whole thing." I said, "Guilty as charged." I mean, because it was in my own selfish interest as well. I want to
Mm-hmm.
work at a workplace that's comfortable and welcoming and,
Mm-hmm.
honors the needs of my whole self, right?
Yeah.
Not just my work self.
Well, and you mentioned Rich Edelman. Of course, that's where I was for a little while. But I've done my share of work with other firms as a
Hmm.
client, and absolutely loved the way that the offices were over there. I mean, if you really wanted to, have a few minutes to find yourself and shut out the world, there was a place for that. If you
Yeah.
wanted to, if you needed to get a little green in your life, even though it was Manhattan, you could go up on the roof and look at, just kind of hang out and figure out there's some trees and there were some plants and you could get a little green space going. There's a park nearby, so you had the opportunity, I think, to meld the space and the purpose to a degree. But that's just an interesting trend. And thank you very much for starting that. If indeed you're the first one. But I wanted to get back on the road here to purpose, because so you found the purpose for your first company, and were leading by example in the industry about purpose. How did that lead you then to devoting more and more of your life to the idea of purpose? Maybe you want to define what you see in simple terms, what purpose really is, first of all, and then like go to your how to go from being a PR, like Hall of Fame PR person, to Joyful Planet.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah. Well, at the time that we were
Mhm.
living and operationalizing our business purpose, I wasn't really thinking of it as a purpose. I was just thinking of it as this is what we commit to doing as an agency,
Mhm.
right? And after 12 years of building PT and company, I was totally burned out. And I went to see an executive coach who was the one who forced me to rethink my purpose in life, my own individual purpose. Now, I don't think I even had a purpose at that point, but she forced me to think about what my life purpose should be. And so I thought about what my life was and realized, and it was filled with so much being there for everyone else and with no attention to myself, that I decided that my life purpose was going to be about choosing joy, being mindful of that joy, and sharing that joy with others, right?
Mm.
A three-part life purpose. Choose joy, be mindful of it, and share it with others. Because I thought by having a life purpose that is as prescriptive as that could help me produce that for myself in the future. And my life at the time, before I articulated my life purpose, I would say it was the opposite of joy.
Really?
So, yeah. And so, one of the first things that she got me to do when she realized, she asked me, "So, what brings you joy?" And without even thinking, I blurted out, "I love to dance." And then, so she made me go take dance lessons for the first time in my life. So at age 50, I enrolled in ballroom dance lessons and I got hooked, and it became my late life passion obsession. So I started competing and
Woo.
winning some championships. I even wrote a book to share the lessons that I learned from ballroom dancing called Becoming Ginger Rogers: How Ballroom Dancing Made Me a Happier Woman, a Better Partner, and a Smarter CEO. And it really did all of those things. So with the experience, when after co-founding my third agency, I realized, you know what? I think I want to do something else. I didn't know what that
Mhm.
something else was going to be. So of course I did the let's look back at my life and career and see what really,
Mhm.
stands out. And I realized that the two most important things I ever did for myself in the 35 plus years that I was in PR and co-founding three award-winning PR agencies was, one, discovering and operationalizing our business purpose for my first agency, and then two, discovering, actively living my own individual life purpose. Those two things had such power, because we know that power or purpose is very powerful. So I thought about, well, maybe I should focus on that, on purpose, on
Mhm.
life purpose and organizational purpose. And that's when I decided I'm going to start Joyful Planet, because that actually is my vision for the planet. If 7.7 billion people are actively living their life purpose and leveraging their talents and their expertise and their passion in service of other people and our planet, that's how we can create a more joyful planet, right?
Mhm.
And so Joyful Planet is focused on helping individuals and organizations discover and either live or operationalize their purpose to unleash greater success, fulfillment, and joy
Yeah.
in your personal life and in your workplaces and in your communities. Because, but when you unleash greater joy, it has a ripple effect, right?
Mm.
And so I look at it that way. If more and more people were actually generating joy, we could create a more joyful planet.
Do you think that joy is always the byproduct or the product of purpose?
I think so. I know there are a lot of experts on joy and a lot of people who tell you how to get happier, right? And again, this is my own
Yeah.
personal experience and, understanding from a lot of research and work that I've done uh, through Joyful Planet. And I actually think that the only sustainable source of joy that we can create for ourselves is when we are leveraging our talents and our expertise and our passion in service of other people and our planet. It's very fleeting and very ephemeral if you only engage in things that are really more care of the soul type things. You get a
Yeah.
massage, you meditate, or
Yeah.
light incense. I mean, that's going to help you, for a little bit. But I think I'm always about the how can we create within ourselves that spring fed pond rather than
Mm.
the swimming pool that we have to keep putting water into in order to have a pool of water.
I love that metaphor. And I tend to mix metaphors a lot, but that's a beautiful one. The spring-fed pond.
I love
Because,
it too.
well,
Yeah,
like when you say joy, like to me, and it just kind of I just thought of this, that in language, right?
right.
When we think about language, it's the shortest words that have the most power.
Yes.
And people say, I think, if I find my purpose, I'll be happy, I'll have happiness. But I don't think that's the same thing as joy.
No.
So can you what's the difference? What do you think is the difference between?
Well, I've read many different definitions and explanations of joy, but the my favorite one, and I don't know who actually said it, was joy is the experience of the preciousness of life.
Hmm.
Joy is the experience of the preciousness of life. So joy isn't about moments of extreme euphoria all the time, because that's not sustainable, right? But if we can deeply feel every single feeling that we experience in life, the good and the bad, we're fully present in our own lives, I think that is the greatest joy that we can have in life.
So you could be experiencing some of the worst, well, experiences, I suppose, that people go through, the tragedy. There could be death and sickness, and that describes, I think, a lot of people certainly this past year. And by the way, at the time of recording, we're still sort of dealing with COVID, and it's February now when we're recording. Although this will be published in June, I think. So hopefully by the time people hear this, they'll be like out and about and vaccinated and feeling good about themselves. But the fact is that they'll have just come through a tragic time,
Yeah.
which for many of us hasn't been all that tragic, to be honest with you. I mean, it's been a time of introspection, but you can't ignore it. You can't ignore the fact that it's tinged with all these experiences. So what you're saying though is that it's right, it's okay. That's part of the whole that feeds joy, or that leads to joy, or that is part of joy. Is that right?
Yes. And I have to say that the past year, as terrible as it has been for so many people, for me personally, it's been one of the most productive and positive years of my life, just because all I've done is just continue to actively live my life purpose every single day. And it's about choosing joy, being mindful of that joy, and sharing that joy with others. So every
Hmm.
day I make choices that will bring me joy. And some of these choices are going to be aggravating until it produces the joy. But
Yeah.
I ultimately feel that this is the best thing that I could do. And the past year has been filled with so many experiences that I've never had, including agreeing to co chair the Diversity Action Alliance, which is a
Hmm.
coalition of 15 of the most
Sure.
influential PR organizations who formed a coalition to take action to create greater diversity, equity, and inclusion in the PR and communications profession. Because this is something that has been talked about for decades. And post George Floyd, I think more and more um, organizations have been finally willing to commit. But
Hmm.
I have to say that the Diversity Action Alliance was formed in 2019, so way before George Floyd in
Hmm.
May of 2020. And I actually only became co chair in March 2020. So there were
Hmm.
many people who were doing a lot of good work, especially including Pat Ford, who was chair before I got on board. But over the past year, I've been working with Pat and a lot of other people to
Hmm.
do some really great work, which makes me really proud of our PR profession, knowing that we're finally getting serious about,
About serious issues.
addressing, right, the systemic racism in our profession. So
And that brings you joy because it's
it
it's
brings me
fulfilling.
great joy. I
Yeah.
feel, because it really is about how we are serving others, right? None of us
Hmm.
involved in DAA are getting paid. We're all doing this in addition to everything else we're doing. So, but we know it's important and we want to be part
Yeah.
of creating the change that we must have. And so that brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah. Do you think do you think this past year
Mhm.
has really affected on a much larger scale people's search for purpose?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because if you're at home, which if you're fortunate enough to be able to work from
Hmm.
home,
Right.
you know, you're thinking about your life and whether your life, the way that you're living it, especially in a dire time like this, is the way you should be spending your one very brief and precious life, right? We
Yeah.
really need to think about, is this the best use of our time and energy? And
Hmm.
if you can't honestly say it is, then you actually need to kind of think about what's a better use of your time and energy. And that's
Hmm.
all about what a life purpose is. And
Yeah.
so organizations who don't recognize that employees are thinking about their life purpose, even if they don't want to have to get into what they consider personal territory
Hmm.
of helping employees with their individual life purpose, they need to do this. It's not enough for businesses, as
Hmm.
I said in my recent blog post. It's not enough just to be a purpose driven business. It's necessary these days to be a purpose driven business, driven and fueled by purpose driven employees. That's the way to tap and unlock all of the potential that is waiting to be unlocked in the people who work for you, you know?
Certainly, most companies that have adapted or aren't in a situation where all of your employees are like frontline workers or you know factory workers or healthcare and so on. If you're not in those major categories, then chances are that as a company you're able to, and you're not in retail, you're not in one of the really heavily affected industries. then chances are you've sent your people home, and especially in corporations, service industries, the corporate parts of production of manufacturing industries, et cetera. Like me, I mean, I've been home since March 5th of last year,
Mhm.
working for one manufacturer and now another, but with different businesses, but still, it's been challenging and amazing experience different ways, right? I mean, I'm not alone. There's everybody else is in the same exact boat who is fortunate enough to have been employed during this period of time. And I think just, going back to something said earlier, I looked at the life around me and what was going on, and first thing I thought of was, well, mortality.
Right.
I mean, this life is short. It's ephemeral. Another one of my favorite words. Thank you very much for bringing that one up. Life is ephemeral. We need to make the time count that we're here. Whatever we, but you know what? I'm ashamed that I just said we need to. We get to. We get to make the time count. I'm really getting conscious and mindful of that whole of the difference between need to and get to, by the way. Recent listeners will understand this. But we really have a great opportunity to take the amount of time that we have and do something, positive for ourselves and for our families and for people, to serve, as you said. Another word that keeps coming up, we're serving. And in my case, I've been a company guy, and I've been hopefully helping to, contributing to the lives of people around me and doing my bit as a provider. But was I happy, or did I have joy? I don't know. I don't think I did. I don't think I had joy all the time. Maybe I felt joyful at moments. And even now, I'm in this process, about to turn 50. I'm thinking, this is the time. Like, now I'm going to figure it out. I mean, I know I'm on the path. I'm getting there, but I'm feeling a lot more joyful these days. But the point is, it was very introspective, looking at the year,
Yes.
thinking, okay, it's a tough time, a lot of terrible things happening. I got to do something. And of course, as you know, we talked about this before. I came to this moment where I was like, I just want to create something. And
Yes.
that word create got to me. So,
Yeah.
the podcast is obviously the main thing that I started, and some writing and some other stuff here and there. And I started thinking more on what creation is, what imagination is. You introduced me to Mitch. It's like he's all about like imagination, and just some amazing work that he's doing, Mitch Markson. But I don't know if that's my purpose necessarily, but I don't know what I know, right? I don't know what I need to know. So, for example, like, it felt right. It felt like things were humming. It feels like there's a harmony, and I feel
Mhm.
like like aha moment, and that it's sort of what I really want to be doing. When you discovered your purpose, when you had that time with your coach and you were like, you know, my purpose is to bring purpose to people. My purpose is to bring joy to people. And, you know, was it did something click in your head? Was it an instantaneous thing, or did you have like the angels sang? What was going on?
No, it was very well. For one thing, I was trying to get out of having to rethink my purpose in life, right? But my coach said, "No, I need you to take some time and figure it out, because if I can help you live your life purpose, then you will be happier and
Hmm.
feel more energized." So for the next 2 weeks, I was brainstorming with myself what my life purpose should be. And I had never come up with a life purpose for myself or anyone else. So all I did was try to think of, okay, let's look at my life now, and let's think about the future I want to create for myself, and what would be the way to do that. And so that's why I came up with that purpose. If my life, as I said, was unjoy, then how could I convert that to joy? And so
Hmm.
I decided, okay, first I have to choose joy, right?
Yep.
I have to be mindful of it, because a lot of times people have joy, but if they're not mindful of it, it's like they never had it. And then finally, you have to share your joy with others, because actually sharing your joy is what creates more joy. Okay. You can't hoard your joy. And so that simple kind of formula or prescription for, bringing more joy into my life was
Hmm.
just, uh, a way to stop the pain of what I was actually living at the time.
Yeah.
And, I've been living my purpose for like 18, 19 years now. So it's a long time. And I actually revisit my purpose from time to time and think, wonder if I should change my purpose. Do I need to change it?
Hmm.
And if so, what would I change it to? And
Yeah.
and the more, whenever I've done that, I thought, no, I think, the litmus test for me with everything is is it a choice for joy, either
Hmm.
immediate or longer term joy? Will it produce joy for me and other people?
Yeah.
And so that is a good litmus test. So I'm sticking with the joy thing. And the thing is
Hmm.
that people think that because my company is called Joyful Planet and I'm the chief joy officer, that I can poof, sprinkle fairy dust and help you be joyful.
Well, can't you?
Yeah, sorry. No, what
Sorry.
I can do
Yeah.
is I can help you discover and articulate your life purpose so that you can then be able to actively live it. And it's in the actively living your life purpose is when you unleash greater,
Hmm.
success and fulfillment and joy. So joy is a byproduct of living our life purpose. I don't think you can just try to be joyful or happy all the time. And you
Yeah.
have to be doing something that produces that as a result of the work that you do.
It's about intent, right? And you have to be intentful and
Right.
mindful. A lot of fulls.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a very creative act. I mean, I
Hmm.
know your podcast is about creativity, and that
Oh yeah.
is, if I think of my strong suit, it really is. I can come up with a creative solution to any problem that I have.
Hmm.
And that's why I'm a good coach slash consultant, though I like being a consultant better because I'd rather be able to brainstorm with somebody and together we come up with the best
Yeah.
solution. I'm
Yeah.
not so much interested in just teaching you to coach yourself because I'd
Hmm.
rather help us come up with the solution
Yeah.
faster so that you can then develop and execute.
Yeah. I kind of like that too. I like that part of the creative process. I like to be a participant in that
Yeah.
more than just a guide. Although, there are times when it's really great just to be a guide and watch
Yes.
somebody come up with amazing things and feel like, okay, I've set this person on a great path. And then you can switch into consultative
Right.
mode
Right.
and then join in the fun.
You could be a hybrid coach
Yeah.
consultant. I
Yeah,
think
I've
that's
talked
great.
about that before, be a
Yeah.
coach consultant.
But I think that discovering and actively living your life purpose is a creative act because you are
Hmm.
actually creating the life that you want to live
Yeah.
by, what you choose to do. And companies can do that and individuals can do that.
Hmm.
And the only people who are kind of a little lost at sea are people who haven't gone through the exercise. And it doesn't have to take a long time of
Hmm.
just thinking through the questions that will lead them to their life purpose so then they can
Yeah.
actively live it. And here's what I tell employers who sometimes haven't wanted to get into the area of individual life purpose and
Hmm.
helping their employees because their fear is,
Yeah.
what if I help my employees discover their life purpose and they discover that it isn't to work at my company, right? That's
Yeah.
their big fear.
Legitimate fear.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, why would you want to have somebody who's not fully committed to wanting to be there?
Hmm.
Make room for somebody who is, because you're going to get a lot more out of that person.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think it just makes sense if you want to unleash, you know, all the potential that you have in, your people, help them to discover and articulate their individual life purpose, then invite them to find the alignment between their individual life purpose and the business purpose of the organization to create greater engagement that will
Hmm.
drive the business forward, right? That makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's what really forward thinking executives and CEOs are doing. And the
Hmm.
only CEO I've heard talk about this is Satya Nadella, the CEO
Microsoft.
of Microsoft,
Hmm.
right? Now, Microsoft has a business purpose to empower individuals and organizations to do more, to achieve more, something like that.
Hmm.
And so it makes sense that he would want to, you know, invite his employees to do the same. So he smartly wants his employees to be able to live their life purpose through the vehicle of Microsoft. So employees can actually say to themselves and to other people, I don't work for Microsoft. Microsoft works for me.
Yeah.
And that is a much better relationship to have with your employee where they feel that they can actually actively live their life purpose through by working at your company, because it's going to be so hard to hire someone like that away to another company that's not inviting their employees to actively live their life purpose through the vehicle of the company, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Right. And it's easier to hire somebody to Microsoft where employees are invited to live their life purpose through the vehicle of the company.
It's such a broad purpose. The Microsoft one that you and I found the article. It's empower every person and every organizations on the planet to achieve more.
Right.
So, I mean, who wouldn't want that, right? Who wouldn't want to be part of that purpose? It sounds like
Right.
it's something you can. So it's actually clever. The employees are can so it's kind of a litmus test. But if an employee isn't on board with that, who would want them? I mean, I don't know if I'd want any company would want somebody like that, right?
Right. Because if you're not entrepreneurial and self directed enough to take the ball and run, well, that's not who Microsoft probably wants to hire. Right.
Right. How important is it for companies to be like very specific with their purpose or broader? Does it matter? Does it depend?
I think it just needs to be a purpose that really resonates, and that, you know, it's something that, like, I have some purpose statements of companies that I think are pretty powerful. Like
Yeah.
Unilever's is probably one of the most powerful, and it's only 4 words, right? Make sustainable living commonplace.
Hmm. Yep.
That's an amazing vision, right, for the company. But it's very clear, and you know that the R&D people at Unilever are very clear about what innovation is at that company,
Yep.
right?
Has to be sustainable. Have to be something. Make something sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't have to spend a lot of time trying to inculcate what's important to Unilever to their employees, because you have a business purpose that is so compelling, so clear, and is not one where there's a lot of wiggle room in terms of what the company focus is.
Yeah. And it just seems that going back to the point that purpose has to resonate,
Mhm.
it's believable coming from a Unilever, right?
Right. And
For
you
now.
would want a company like Unilever to make that their business purpose, right? For the sake of the planet, right?
Yeah. I mean, but that same purpose at a tobacco company, for example, just when we're how I mean, I'm not saying that we should try to help a tobacco company necessarily find what their purpose is, unless their purpose might be to end smoking and put myself out of business. I don't know, but I mean, I'm sure there's legitimate things,
Well,
but
like, look at
yeah.
this. Not to say that Starbucks is in the same boat as,
Hmm.
a sin company, but Starbucks' purpose is to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time.
Yeah.
So so you could actually come up with a business purpose for a tobacco company
Hmm.
that doesn't overstate it
Yeah.
and say that we're going to be the salvation of humanity, right?
Right.
Starbucks is only saying that they want to inspire and nurture the human spirit because so many people come into a Starbucks to do some creative work, to do
Yeah.
some writing, right?
Or to just get through their morning, or
Right,
to
exactly.
just kind of get that pick me up. But that explains how that permeates down into the behavior of every staff member of the baristas who are just
Exactly.
there to to make your day better, as
Yeah,
annoying as it sometimes might be, but that's what they want to do, right? That's the
right.
whole point.
And I think it's very efficient because if you have tens of thousands of employees, you want a very resonant way to communicate to employees what our focus is as a company. So I think a business purpose really, and one that resonates with, all of your stakeholders, makes sense, right? And
Yeah.
that's what a business purpose is, creating value for all stakeholders and serving the greater good, right?
Yeah. And to be clear, you're not saying that the company purpose has to be the individual purpose. It is that the individual purpose, there has to be some alignment. They can't conflict with one another.
Right.
But the company should be encouraging and supporting individuals in finding their purpose.
Yeah. And that's the blog post that I wrote on Monday because
Yeah.
it's not enough for companies just to say, okay, this is our corporate, our business, our organizational purpose. Now, all of you employees embrace it and, you know, kind of execute. Well, your purpose isn't necessarily going to resonate with every single employee. It's much better to work with your employees to find out what their individual purpose is and see if they can find the
Yeah.
alignment, find a way to live their individual purpose while helping the organization in their business purpose. Because there's always a way to find an alignment, and just the invitation to align with the company's business purpose is recognizing that a business purpose has to be driven by people, right? It's not machines that are going to drive your business purpose. It's people. So if people aren't buying into it and can't see how this makes sense for them,
Yeah.
you're kind of sub optimizing in terms of performance and productivity, I think.
Well, I mean, it's got to start. I mean, it has to be start from from the managerial side of things, right? I mean, it has to be sort of a culture change that happens. I don't want to say top down necessarily because we're trying to get away from hierarchy so much. We're trying to, but just for this, for the simplicity of explanation, you know, changing a company's behavior or understanding that if you're a purpose driven company and you want to encourage your employees to also find their own purpose and be purpose driven within and feel free to be that, feel safe to have their purpose within the company. That has to come from the highest levels of the company, does it not?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's the most effective way to do it. That's why you have Satya Nadella talking about this. And it's not surprising that Microsoft is one of only three companies to have achieved $1 trillion valuation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, Nadella did it even when Balmer and Gates weren't able to do it, right? He
Yeah.
was the one who did it. And he, of all three of them, is much more attuned to the individual, right? Because of his own personal life experience and everything.
Well, some of that's also a product of the timing of it all, right? I mean,
Yes, yes.
you were way ahead of your time in the 90s with doing this. Microsoft in the 90s was absolutely not doing this, right? I mean, I don't think
Yeah,
they were.
no, no, no. They were just, yeah. And in fact, we did the consumer launch of Windows 95. That was kind of a
Oh,
fun thing.
I remember.
Yeah. And
I remember that.
we were an all Mac agency.
So funny.
I know, I
Yeah.
know.
Well, I mean, and that was a turning point for Microsoft for sure. It was Windows 95. I was in Japan at the time, and I remember
Oh,
I remember working at a company that was like all Mac, and we had these, and you go back to the mid '90s, and Mac, these things were constantly a little bomb kept coming up on the screen.
yeah,
You know,
I remember.
you had right, yeah, it's just like constant frustration
Right.
if you're trying to use it for business, but there's nothing good. And then Windows 95 comes out, and you're like, boss, you got to get me one of these new machines, you know? And they're like, no, what do you want the window, and the tide changed, everything switched back. And now I'm comfortable with both of those environments now, but it
Yeah.
was an interesting time to kind of, I don't know,
I'm kind of a
decide?
hybrid. Well, the thing was that we were an all Mac agency because Chiat Day was the agency that represented Apple,
Oh, at
right?
the time.
So we were, so we became a
No
Mac
choice.
shop.
That's funny.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's the funny thing about PR agencies, and advertising agencies. You have to got to walk the walk there. You have to.
right. We had to rent a whole suite of PCs for the Microsoft team at our agency. And, we told the client, and they said, oh, it's okay. Bill Gates has made a lot of money off of Apple. He doesn't care.
Oh man. There's so much more here about purpose that I want to get into with you. And before we wind down,
Mhm.
right? I just wanted to ask, like, if somebody's stuck, like they can't figure out how to get to that purpose, right? That
Right.
you said earlier, you were talking about it's not that hard. Sit down and talk, and just think about it for a while. But I'm sure it's not quite that easy, right? So what about the people out there that are just stuck and can't figure out,
Yeah.
or maybe they don't know if they're on the right track, or they don't know what they don't know. What would you advise them?
Thank you for asking that question because I once, when I started Joyful Planet in the early days, I was invited to do kind of a workshop for like 90 minutes with 25 people. And I was thinking, what can I do with 25 people? So I thought, you know what? Let me put together the shortest number of questions that if somebody answered it fully and completed the questionnaire, they could have enough information to write the first iteration of their life purpose statement.
Hmm.
So that's what I did. So I have this is the 17th version of that 11 question questionnaire. I could have had 50 questions, but then nobody would complete that
Well, sure.
questionnaire.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 11 questions, there's enough information where after somebody writes the first iteration of their purpose statement and then sends it to me, I go through their responses to all 11 questions, see what they wrote, and then tweak it. Sometimes I have to totally restate it. Sometimes it's just a matter of lightly editing, but it depends on if somebody is a writer
Hmm.
and is willing to or able to face what it is
Yeah.
they need to do. So here's what I'm going to offer as a 1 year anniversary present to you and to your listeners.
Yay.
So 10 people who listen to your podcast and hear this offer, if they email me, patrice@joyfulplanet.com, patrice@joyfulplanet.com, I will send them the 11 question questionnaire. If they complete it and send it back to me, I'll help them finalize their life purpose statement. And, but I'll do it just for 10. And if somebody number 11 sends me an email, I'm going to have to politely
You have
say
to
I'm
politely
so
decline.
sorry. Yeah, yeah. And Dan, I want one of those people to be you because I
I,
think it would be fun, right? And
I'm in.
cool. All
I'm
right.
absolutely in. And so you heard that 9 people.
9 people.
So, well, you heard it here, folks. Patrice at joyfulplanet.com. And I'll put all this stuff in the show notes. And, it's an incredibly generous gift. I thank you very, very much for that, Patrice.
My
I
pleasure.
think
Happy
that,
anniversary.
yeah, this is very, very likely my 1 year episode,
Yeah. I
as
love
we're
it.
recording this. And I can't be, more, I can't be luckier than to have you on this show for my first year. This is
Aw.
great. It's just, I mean, look, the show I've loved doing this. And when you talk about, you know, finding purpose, I don't know if the podcast is my purpose, but I know it's an expression of it. And I know that I'm having so much fun with it. And even when it's not fun, it's something that, like, talking with people is never not fun, by the way.
Right.
The not fun part is like, I got to edit, or I got to like put this, I actually have to keep a spreadsheet of my guests now. I have to actually do work. I didn't realize it was going to be work. I thought it was just like you push a button and then
Yeah.
send it somewhere and it's published. And look, and a lot of the great things about this is that I feel like it's just getting easier and better. The conversations have always been good, but I feel like they're getting, somewhat more directed, somewhat smoother, but at the same time, I was afraid that after having so many guests, I might be like, what do I have to talk about? But it's the opposite. It is the absolute opposite. The more guests I have, the more I feel like I have things to talk about and interesting, and it's always reinforcing my primary thesis, which is that people are interesting.
Yeah.
I love introducing interesting people to my listeners. Anyway, I can go on for hours about that. I have, but I am no look. I think it's a fantastic mark of how joyful this show is for me that you are my 1 year guest. So
Aw,
thank you so much for that, Patrice.
my
It's been a
pleasure.
pleasure. And I know that our friends are going to be very happy to hear this episode as well. We have some great mutual friends.
Yes.
Ken, Todd, Adrian, like a bunch of really wonderful people. And
And wait, we have to say everyone is 6 degrees of Ken Jacobs.
is that what it is? Is it 6 degrees of Ken Jacobs?
Yeah, it might be 2 degrees because that has even.
Yeah. His episode was fantastic too. And I have to say that, it's been a boon of good fortune.
Yeah.
If that's a little redundant, but it has been fantastic to have everybody on the show, from the Deirdre Ken nexus that led to you.
2 amazing people. Right?
But listen, Patrice, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you wanted to mention? I mean, you already gave me a gift, or giving everybody a gift. You're good?
No, I'm just excited that we're going to help you discover and articulate your life purpose that you have greater clarity about that. Because here's the thing, a lot of people feel that their lives are unfulfilled. And a lot of times it's because they don't know what their life purpose is. They haven't taken time to actually think it through and articulate it and then actively live it. So because they have a lack of clarity, they think they don't have a life purpose. And that's sad. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And to help people get that clarity is, like I said before, is a tremendous gift. So thank you for that. You can find Patrice Tanaka at joyfulplanet.com. You can look for Patrice on LinkedIn. Just look for her name, Patrice Tanaka. It will be spelled properly in the episode title. Any place else that people can find you, Patrice, that I didn't mention?
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So my Twitter handle is at Sambagal, Sambagal. That's because I started it so long ago when I was in the throes of my ballroom dance obsession.
Okay, well, Samba Girl, but the rest of them have, if you
Samba Gal,
Samba Gal, and the rest of them are all Patrice. If you look for Patrice Tanaka, you'll find her. And I would absolutely recommend checking out Joyful Planet. Patrice, this has been an absolute pleasure. I knew it would be, and I thank you so much for coming on and spending the time with me and my listeners.
My pleasure. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of The Dan Nessel Show, please head on over to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the podcast player of your choice to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And please don't forget to spread the word. Thanks for listening.